Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving right into a historical showdown that honestly still challenges everything we think we know about integrity. We're talking about the trial and final days of Socrates. We're not just going to rattle off the dry facts here. Oh no, we are exploring what actually happens when a person's rock-solid core principles violently collide with absolute power and the very real terrifying threat of execution. But hey, before we march into that courtroom, we've got to tackle a massive core mystery. If Socrates is literally the father of Western philosophy, why didn't the guy write down a single word? It's so counterintuitive to how we think today, right? I mean, we just assume the greatest thinkers leave behind these massive, heavy books. But Socrates? He left us absolutely nothing written by his own hand. Zero. To really grasp how he faced his death, we first need to understand why he refused to pick up a pen in the first place. Well, Plato's accounts reveal a really fascinating reason for this. Socrates firmly believed that writing just couldn't truly teach you anything. Think about it. A static piece of text only tells you exactly what's on the page, and nothing more. If you're confused, you can't exactly ask a book for clarification, can you? So for Socrates, philosophy wasn't some boring textbook meant to be memorized. It was an action. It was a dynamic, lived conversation between a student and a teacher designed to lead human souls toward the good. Philosophy had to be practiced, out loud, in real time. Section 1. Defying the 30 Tyrants. You see, if philosophy is an action to be lived, well, Socrates was about to get the ultimate, high-stakes opportunity to practice it. Let's set the scene. It's 404 BC. Athens has just been captured by the Spartans, and a ruthless, absolutely murderous oligarchy gets set up. History knows them as the 30 Tyrants. And these tyrants, they had a very specific playbook. They didn't just want to kill their enemies, they wanted to make everyone else complicit in their crimes. It's a classic mob tactic. So during this reign of terror, the oligarchs order Socrates and 4 other men to the rotunda. They command them to travel to the island of Salamis, grab a man named Leon, and bring him back. The goal was sickeningly simple: bring Leon to Athens for an unjust execution, which perfectly implicates Socrates and the others in his murder. And let's be clear, to disobey a direct order from the 30 tyrants, that almost certainly meant your own death. So what happened? Well, the other 4 guys were utterly terrified, so they obeyed. They sailed off to Salamis and dragged Leon back. But Socrates? He later talked about this exact moment and said, "I showed not by words but by actions that I did not care a straw about death." While everyone else caved to the terror, Socrates just quietly turned around and walked home. He completely disregarded the massive target he just painted on his own back. Why? Because for him, the fear of doing something unrighteous or unholy was so much greater than his fear of the tyrants. He literally lived his philosophy. And honestly, he probably would have been executed right then and there if the oligarchy hadn't been overthrown just a short while later. Section 2. A trial without tears. Okay, so democracy is eventually restored in Athens, but Socrates is definitely not out of the woods. He quickly gets indicted by a young poet named Meletus on some pretty heavy charges: impiety and corrupting the youth. Suddenly, our philosopher finds himself standing in front of a massive jury of over 500 judges. Now, you have to picture an ancient Athenian court. The standard legal strategy back then was basically putting on a giant emotional theater production. Your average defendant would get up there, beg for mercy, cry, and literally parade their weeping children and relatives in front of the jury just to score an acquittal out of pure pity. But Socrates? No way. He absolutely refused to play the victim. He actually addresses this whole expectation head on. He looks at the jury and basically says, "Look, I am a man, and like other men, a creature of flesh and blood. I have a family, yes, and sons, yet I will not bring any of them hither in order to petition you for an acquittal." So why take this heartline approach when his life is on the line? Because he truly believed that begging was disgraceful, and even worse, it was impious. See, the judges had sworn a sacred oath to decide the case based on the law, not on their feelings. Socrates argued that if he manipulated them with crying kids to overpower those sworn oaths, he'd literally be teaching the jury to break the law and disrespect the gods. It is just a remarkably grounded stance. He entirely refused to compromise his integrity, even if it meant saving his own skin. Moving on to Section 3, the Daimonions telling silence. So you've got to wonder, what gave him this unshakable, almost unbelievably stubborn resolve in the face of a death sentence? Well, Socrates frequently talked about something he called his Daimonion. It was this divine inner sign or voice that he'd experienced ever since he was a little kid. But here's the really fascinating part about it. It acted strictly as a preventative measure. Think of it like a curb bit on a horse. Because Socrates was this naturally eager, highly inquisitive guy, he often needed to be reined in. But the Daimonion never actually gave him positive instructions on what to do next. Why? Because that would just make him a puppet, right? It would rob him of his free will. Instead, it let him act as a totally self-moving, rational human being. But if he was about to make a huge mistake or do something morally wrong, that inner voice would instantly intervene and stop him in his tracks. And this brings us to what I think is the most brilliant plot twist in the whole trial. Throughout his entire defense, Socrates knows full well that his uncompromising, no-tears stance is deeply aggravating the jury. He knows he's walking right into a death sentence, yet his normally highly active divine sign, completely silent. It never stopped him once. So Socrates deduces a profound truth from this silence. He tells the court, "For the customary sign would surely have opposed me had I been going to evil and not to good." Because his daimonion didn't stop his defiant defense, he knew, with absolute, unshakable certainty, that his impending execution was actually a good thing. Section 4. A revolutionary view of death. This logical leap leads right into his final, incredibly uplifting reframing of his own execution. Socrates just breaks it all down with pure ice-cold logic. He argues to the crowd that death can really only be one of two possible things. Option 1, death is just a state of utter nothingness and total unconsciousness. Or, option 2, as the ancient myths say, there's a change, a migration of the soul from this world to another realm entirely. And what's truly amazing here is how he logically proves that both of these outcomes are actually entirely positive. Think about it. If death is just nothingness, Socrates says it's basically like a night of deep, dreamless sleep. Ask yourself, how many days or nights in your entire life were truly better or more deeply restorative than a night of perfectly peaceful, undisturbed sleep? If eternity is just one single, endless night exactly like that, honestly, that sounds like a blessing. But on the flip side, if death is actually a journey down to the underworld, oh man, that means he gets to leave behind all these flawed, corrupt professors of justice in Athens. He gets to go meet the true, impartial judges of the afterlife, legendary figures like Minos and Rhadamanthus. Plus, he'd get to hang out and converse with the greatest heroes of the past, picking their brains and continuing his philosophical inquiries forever, basically as an immortal. It's a win-win. Which brings him to this incredibly powerful conclusion. He says, now if death is like this, I say that to die is gain. It was this absolute logical certainty that allowed Socrates to accept a completely unjust execution with such incredible grace. Because he was so thoroughly convinced that his death wasn't an evil thing, he explicitly told the crowd that he wasn't even angry with his condemners or his accusers. They seriously thought they were hurting him, but in his mind, they were just releasing him to something so much better. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with his iconic final words to that jury. He said, "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die and you to live. Which is better, God only knows." Socrates walked away to face his execution, not as a broken victim, but as a guy who had completely conquered the fear of death through pure reason. He lived his philosophy down to the very last breath. And honestly, it just leaves us all with a pretty heavy question to ponder. What is the true value of our own lives if we aren't willing to stand up and maybe even die for our absolute integrity? Think about it. And as always, keep questioning everything.